Okay, so I've decided to start off this year with, rather than a reflective journal, a reflective blog of sorts, because for several reasons really. First of all, writing for me is easy and I always get good marks in it, and so you think, oh, why would not keep on with that if you know you're going to do okay? But I feel like if you don't take a risk, then what's the point? And also, I am an absolutely appalling public speaker, or I have become one over the past few years. Strangely, I think it's just when you leave school and you don't have to do presentations and things like this anymore that I've become quite anxious, and when I speak I sound like I'm going to cry. So I'm 22 now and I'm going to have to get a job soon, and I'm going to need to be able to interact and have good social skills and not just lie about being a really social and easy person to talk to. So this is partially for a bit of self-improvement, and as you can see, I am not the most, it's not as easy for me to talk, so I'm hoping this will help me improve that, so it's a bit of self-improvement for me. And as we don't actually have to do reflective journals this year, it's optional. I thought this might be a bit more of an interesting way to evaluate my work in a different way, and because it's not a requirement, it's not like I have to worry about meeting a set of standards. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to do this, especially as I think moving into the last year of my art education and my practice has kind of gone a bit, taken a different turn. So this blog, or video, is an evaluation of my art journey and my current art practice, an evaluation of last year. I also have done some aims for the year, but I might get onto that in my next one, depending on how this one goes. So I'll start with my art practice, my art journey, which sounds so sounds a bit cheesy, but it is what it is. So basically, I knew I wanted to do art when I was about 16, and for various reasons, I think I thought, oh, I'm going to be a Turner Prize winner, I'm going to be the new Tracey Emin, and I was all full of that. And my art teacher, who I had when I was 16, 17, 18 before I left school, she was very encouraging, and I could be completely ambitious. Whatever I wanted to make, I would make, and I think this is possibly, these few years were possibly the most assured that my practice had ever been. And I think that's partially because I was in a class of 6, and even when I was in GCSE age, it was a bigger class, but there were about 3 of us who actually wanted to pursue artistic careers of any kind. So we were in the elite, and there's always the whole thing when you're in the elite and you think you're the bee's knees, you don't have anyone to compete with in your peers, so you just do whatever you want to do and you're the top dog and it's all good. So I was making work based on concepts I was interested in, and I did stuff about growing up. They were all quite basic concepts, and they were things based. Often I did one about how relationships are portrayed in the media and how we feel like we need to live up to these expectations and kind of replicate these relationships. And these were things that were personal to me, but they were portrayed in a more universal way, because it wasn't like I feel this way, it was just a general idea, I think. Then as I was about 18 and it was my final year of school, I did some more personal stuff. I did a piece about my grandma, who had obsessive compulsive disorder, and she was an alcoholic. She drank to deal with the mental illness she had. She died when I was 7, so it was it was interesting to do research into somebody who I hadn't really known that well, really. I mean, it was personal for me because she was my grandma. Obviously, I had an attachment to her when I was younger, but obviously we had a bit of a weird relationship, because by that point, because she died of natural causes, brought on by alcoholism, and she was totally not with it in my lifetime. So I was attached to her because she was my grandma, but she wasn't exactly like your average gran, really. So yeah, I used that to kind of explore these things that were obviously prevalent in her life. Also meant that she was never that close with us because she kept a distance. She was very like, she had there's different types of obsessive compulsive order, and she had the type which meant she was very like obsessive about cleaning. So being around children, not exactly the easiest thing. And also because I found it interesting in that mental illness now more and more these days is being talked about, but for people of that generation, you don't really talk about that kind of thing. So it was going on for years and years and years. My grandpa never said anything about it, and he kind of enabled her, to be honest. And I found that through kind of like denial, really. But I found all that very interesting, and honestly, I think that is probably my favourite work I've ever made. And I think you could say, oh, but you were like 18, you're not really making, like, you're doing like GCSE A level standard art. And that might be true, but I still think it was really good. Like, I don't often think about my work and think, that's great, well done me, like 100% across the board. But that was probably the most confident I was about my practice ever, and have been probably since then. Because at the end of the year, when I finished school, my second piece that I had to make that year wasn't as good, but I was 18, I just turned 18, so I kind of like discovered alcohol and going out, so it is what it is. So then, foundation year, my practice went a little bit all over the shop. I was very thrown off by my tutors, to be honest. They were not very good. I felt very unencouraged by them, and I was travelling 2 hours to get to uni and back, and the whole thing was just tiring. It was not a good year for me at all. In the end, my final piece was just not impressive. It was interesting. It was about my anxiety, and I was doing it about the cycle and all the, not tics that I had, but the things I would do to cope with my anxiety, like the physical things I would do. So I liked the concept, but the actual physical outcome was lacking, seriously lacking. But, you know, you learn, you grow, whatever. So I got into Falmouth University, which was great, and first year, hard to say, because the outcome of my physical work, I was a big fan of. It was inspired by Louise Bourgeoisie, can't pronounce that, but no, Bourgeoisie, I don't think that's the right thing at all. But yeah, it was basically quite heavily inspired by her. You'd say it was a bit of an homage, to be honest, unintentionally at first, but you could see the similarities, and I looked into her work and I was like, oh my gosh, it's perfect, this is what I'm doing, basically. Okay, so since I was a kid, I developed insomnia, and I would kind of get it in bouts where suddenly I'd kind of just fall into this thing and I just wouldn't sleep for about 6 months. And it never went on long enough for like doctors to prescribe. They don't like prescribing insomnia medication at all. And it would come in about 6 months, between 4 and 9 month bouts. And unfortunately, it happened in my first year, which meant I basically just decided to make work based on this, because it kind of made the most sense. I was doing a lot of drawing when I couldn't sleep, because I just doodling stuff, and I used that source material and I wanted to make like a child fort. God, I can't even remember why. But at the time it made sense. I think it was just to do with, maybe because I've had it since I was a kid. I'm not really sure, to be honest, but basically I was just doing all these drawings, and in the end I ended up painting them on a sheet, completed it over about month, 5 week period of just doing it when I couldn't sleep. And I ended up hanging it, not as a fort, because logistically it just didn't work how I wanted it to do, but I did end up hanging it on some branches that I painted black, and I was really pleased with that. Honestly, it was a bit of a bittersweet kind of thing, because I had been fairly miserable because I hadn't been sleeping at all. So that was that. So second year, this is when I'm doing my second year evaluation. Second year, another interesting one. It was hard, and there were definite points where I'm like, bad, not good at all. But I also gained quite a lot of perspective on my own practice. I also think I did produce some interesting work that year, and I did discover a lot about what I want to be doing in my work. So I started the year with something that I'd kind of been interested in for a while, and I still am, but it's kind of something that cannot really develop further than what it is. And basically I was collecting things that had been leaved inside books, so secondhand books, and my dad owns a book warehouse with all these secondhand books, so I had a lot. I have boxes and boxes still, about 3 boxes just full of paper, so I'll have a lot of stuff. So I spent the first term basically attempting to jimmy this into something other than just displaying it, because you can't that's not a development, you just display it. About 2 months into the term, around November time, came to the realisation cannot be developed. It is what it is. It's strongest just being displayed. I felt anyway. I mean, you could disagree, but this is what I came to believe, and this is what my tutor said as well. So I was like, oh shit, we're in November. I've basically done nothing. I have nothing to show for it other than my failures, which, thinking about the marks, not great. So I started to work with writing, which, as I said, is something that I consider I'm quite strong with. Maybe not as creative writing so much, I've discovered, I think. But I'm still I like writing. I find it very therapeutic. So I started writing about my personal experiences, kind of mental health oriented, personal stuff though. And it's really strange, I'm talking about this and I can't remember why I did any of it. It made total sense at the time to me, and I'm sure I've written it somewhere, but I just can't remember why. I started working with a chair, and this is kind of similar to the work I did with my project about my grandma, which was with a couch, which was meant to be a symbol of domesticity, and I painted it white so it was very sterile, makes you think of hospitals, stuff like that. And I kind of like that idea. I like the idea of a piece of furniture that symbolises something. So I went with a chair for reasons I can't remember, but and I painted it white and then carved my writing into it. And this was going on for a few months actually, and after November, and the work was, I felt, strong aesthetically, but because I'd been doing all this writing, but at the time I was like, I'm really not comfortable putting myself out there in such a personal way, so I redacted it a lot. I was taking out words willy-nilly, so the idea was that it was meant to still bring that kind of feeling of what I was saying without anything specific. And when I started this, it was very redacted. It just didn't make sense, total nonsensical, did not bring the feeling, but I didn't quite see that because I'd written it. I knew what it was about, so to me, I saw it in such a way. It wasn't until I started getting further down the chair and I started redacting less and less, becoming a bit more confident and being like, yes, I can do this, and I started redacting it less, that I realised how ridiculous and nonsensical it sounded at the top of the chair. And that was one of the things I've taken from second year. One of the most important things I've taken is that I like making work that's personal and about me, and I like exploring myself and my own internal feelings, all the internal stuff. That's the stuff I find interesting. I find the kind of externalization of the internal and whatever That's what I like to do in my practice. And I found that I'd crossed a line with that work where I had strayed into it just didn't make sense to the viewer. And when it came to the exhibition, which I put the chair in, I found people had actually got a really strong response to it. And they were like, oh, it looks really interesting. And they were saying all these things that I found, like, I hadn't thought all of them, of course, but I was like, oh, this is a great response. But they were responding to the chair, the physical act of scratching, which was meant to be kind of cathartic because it took forever. But people were very positive about that kind of stuff. But I felt that the writing, the actual content, had been lost, and people would pick out certain words, which was kind of the intention. But I did feel that I could have been writing about anything, really. I could be writing about, you know, the Syrian war crisis. Nobody know, because it's just the odd words that were being picked out were quite, you know, they could be anything. It just didn't make sense. So I felt I'd gone way too personal, and it just didn't work. And I thought it was a really good experiment because I still really like the piece, and it's just over there. I use it as an actual chair now, very useful. And I think that was the strong thing that came out of that year, physically, probably. And I felt I learned a lot from it, and it was nice to have made something after first year being a bit of a miserable era for me, and foundation being so all over the place and fairly unproductive, really, that I'd made something that I was actually like, I'm proud of this. I've made something that I think is good. My tutor was not as positive as some of the other tutors, which was a shame, but I ignored him and listened to the other ones because, you know, I was still pretty proud of the thing. So for the rest of the year, I kind of carried on with this whole furniture thing, and one of the I started going back with my themes of repetition, which was a thing in my project about my grandma, project about various other things, repetition and the whole repeating act thing. And I started doing a lot of writing, but not with my own words. I would take pre-existing pieces, blocks of text from books that I had personal resonance with me, made something else from them. I really enjoyed that. I think I actually created some really strong content from that, but I haven't actually brought that forward this year because even if I wanted to, it's just not relevant, and it doesn't make sense to waste my time on something that is not going to benefit me. But I do think it's something that I might bring back later. But I did find myself playing around a lot with writing that hadn't been written by me, but I engineered to my purposes. I found myself playing a lot more of language, and to be honest, I feel that my practice in second year I really came to terms with the fact that I wanted to incorporate this into my work, and I also wanted to still work with sculpture because I like the physicality of it, definitely, and it's something that I would never really want to give up because it's the thing that made me love making work in the first place. I love making something ambitious and something big and something that somebody could, you know, really be face to face with, and in a 3D sort of sense, which is something that I've kind of deviated a bit away from now, but you know, I still think it's still an important part of my practice even if I'm not currently doing that. So I started working with repeating stuff and a lot of language work, and I was kind of experimenting a lot, and at the time that seemed like a good idea because I wasn't in my last year, so I didn't really need to be, I thought I could just experiment away, continue on doing whatever. And in the end I think I probably should have been worrying more about developing and less about just doing anything because I wanted to. I ended up with a piece of some lamps which were like covered in stuff. Again, I can't exactly remember why, but the whole idea was I was just not overthinking anything, just doing it. I was experimenting, playing, having fun. And that was good for me, I think. Maybe not great for my marks, I didn't do terribly, but I didn't do amazingly either. So I learned a lot from that year. I learned a lot because I kind of had a better grip on what my practice is, and I was including language in, which to me was like a light turning on. Like, obviously I should be using language. I love writing, I've always written and I've always read, and it's just like, duh. Like, why did I not think of this sooner? So yeah, that brings us to the end of my self-evaluation of second year, which brings me to this year, which I think I will do in a separate little blog. So yeah, the end of my cheesy art journey.